In the 16th century, a century of exploration, empires, and dramatic religious change, one man sailed farther than any other Christian missionary in history up to that point. His name was Francis Xavier, a founding father of the Jesuits, a traveler across oceans, a preacher of unmatched zeal, and a man so filled with the love of Christ that entire civilizations felt his presence. His missions across India, the Indonesian archipelago, Japan, and toward China would earn him a title many believe truly belonged to him, the St. Paul of the 16th century. Part 1. Early Life and Education. Early life. Francis Xavier, born Francisco de Jasso y Azpilicueta, entered the world on April 7, 1506, at the family castle of Xavier in the Kingdom of Navarre, modern-day Spain. His family possessed nobility, education, and deep Christian values. The political environment of Navarre at this time was turbulent. Wars, shifting borders, and foreign intervention shaped the region. Francis grew up witnessing both privilege and instability. These early experiences gave him resilience, mental discipline, and an ability to adapt, all of which later shaped his missionary character. As a youth, Francis excelled in academics and athletics. He had a sharp intellect and a strong sense of ambition. Those who knew him described a young man confident, charismatic, and determined to achieve academic greatness. Inspired by dreams of becoming a respected scholar, he traveled to the University of Paris at age 19, unaware that God was preparing him for a mission that would change the world. Meeting Ignatius of Loyola. At the University of Paris, Francis lived the life of a brilliant young academic. He studied philosophy, trained as a professor, and surrounded himself with intellectual peers who admired his talent. It was here that he encountered Ignatius of Loyola, a former soldier, older, wounded in battle, and newly converted. Ignatius saw something extraordinary in Francis, a fiery passion that could either lead him to worldly success or be transformed into spiritual greatness. Ignatius slowly began inviting Francis into conversations about life's deeper purpose. He repeated a question that pierced the young scholar's heart. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? At first, Francis resisted. He found Ignatius too serious, too intense. But Ignatius did not give up. He prayed for Francis daily. He accompanied him through academic struggles. Gradually, Francis recognized that the professor's success he once desired could not satisfy the longing of his soul. This inner battle lasted years. Finally, Francis surrendered, not out of defeat, but out of discovery. He realized God was calling him to something far greater than academic glory. The birth of the Jesuits. On August 15, 1534, in a small chapel on the hill of Montmartre in Paris, Francis Xavier joined Ignatius and 5 companions in taking vows of poverty, chastity, and apostolic mission. They consecrated their lives to God and promised to go wherever the Pope would send them. This moment marked the birth of the Society of Jesus, later known as the Jesuits, a religious order dedicated to education, missionary work, and total obedience to God's will. Francis's transformation from ambitious scholar to humble servant of Christ was complete. He had found something greater than worldly success. He found purpose, and soon the entire world would feel the impact of his yes to God. The call to the East. In 1540, King John III of Portugal requested missionaries for the rapidly expanding Portuguese territories in Asia, regions stretching from India to the Malay Peninsula, Indonesia, Japan, and beyond. When Ignatius received the request, he originally intended to send 2 other men, but one of them fell gravely ill. Ignatius turned toward Francis Xavier and said one word that changed history: "Go." Francis obeyed instantly, trusting that God was calling him to a mission far greater than he could imagine. He would leave behind his homeland, his friends, and the comfort of Europe, possibly forever. He boarded a Portuguese ship in Lisbon in April 1541. The journey to India took more than 13 months, filled with storms, sickness, and death. Francis spent the entire voyage caring for the sick, teaching sailors, and praying with the dying. By the time the ship arrived in Goa, nearly half the crew had died, yet Francis's faith only grew stronger. His heart burned with zeal. He wrote, "The farther I travel, the more I desire to proclaim Christ." Part 2. Mission in India and Southeast Asia. Arrival in Goa. When Francis Xavier arrived in Goa in 1542, he entered a bustling port city filled with sailors, merchants, soldiers, and travelers from every corner of Asia. Goa was the heart of Portuguese power in the East, a mixture of wealth and poverty, faith and corruption, hope and disappointment. Francis quickly recognized that many Catholics there had forgotten the gospel. Instead of starting with distant missions, he began right where he landed, among the sick, the abandoned, the enslaved, and the children left wandering the streets. He preached in markets, hospitals, prisons, and even docks where sailors unloaded cargo. He rang a little bell each morning, walking through neighborhoods and calling children to catechism. Many who witnessed him said, "He lived exactly what he preached." His simplicity and sincerity stirred hearts more deeply than any long sermon. The Parava Mission, baptizing thousands. Soon, Francis received news of the Parava people along the fishery coast in southern India, a community that had embraced Christianity but had no priests and faced violent persecution from rival clans. He immediately traveled south by foot, boat, and horseback to reach them. There, he found thousands hungry for teaching. Francis baptized entire villages, sometimes hundreds in a single day. He taught prayers by singing them out loud, because music helped the new believers memorize quickly. He slept outside, endured extreme heat, ate simple food, and traveled constantly along the coast. Many of his letters describe the exhaustion, yet also the overwhelming joy of seeing the gospel take root. Miracles and conversions. Numerous eyewitness accounts from the 16th century describe extraordinary miracles performed by Francis Xavier. Fishermen testified that when storms threatened to destroy their boats, Francis prayed and the seas calmed. Families claimed he healed their sick children with the sign of the cross. Sailors told stories of him predicting safe passage through dangerous waters. Francis himself rarely wrote about miracles. He focused instead on people's souls. But the testimonies were so numerous that he became known throughout the coast as the Holy Father who walks with God. Beyond India, expansion into Southeast Asia. Francis did not remain in one place. His missionary vision stretched far beyond the shores of India. Between 1545 and 1548, he traveled through present-day Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. He preached in villages, ports, marketplaces, and islands that had never before heard the name of Christ. In Malacca, he founded a college. In the Moluccas, Spice Islands, he lived among small tribal communities, often in dangerous conditions. He wrote that he wished he could ring a bell in every village on earth and teach children the creed. Part 3. The Japanese Mission and Final Journey. Journey to Japan. In 1549, after hearing reports of a distant and sophisticated kingdom where learning was prized, Francis Xavier set his sights on Japan. He believed that if Japan accepted the gospel, the entire East might follow. He boarded a tiny Chinese junk with just 2 Jesuits and a converted Japanese nobleman named Anjiro. The voyage was treacherous: storms, pirates, hunger. Yet Francis never wavered. When he finally landed at Kagoshima, he kissed the ground in gratitude. Evangelizing Japan. Japan astonished Francis. He found a people disciplined, intelligent, logical, and deeply philosophical. They did not accept ideas easily. They questioned, analyzed, and demanded proof. Francis adapted immediately, adjusting his preaching style to meet Japanese intellect and dignity. He learned basic Japanese, translated prayers, and dressed as a Japanese nobleman when meeting local leaders. He traveled through Kagoshima, Hirado, Yamaguchi, and Kyoto, speaking to monks, scholars, and samurai. Many were moved by his holiness and courage. The seed of Christianity in Japan. Within 2 years, Francis Xavier baptized around 2,000 Japanese converts, an extraordinary achievement considering the language barriers and cultural complexities. He planted seeds that later blossomed into one of the most heroic chapters of church history. the faith of the Japanese martyrs, Francis longed to go deeper into Japan's imperial court, believing he could convert the emperor himself, but political tensions prevented it. Still, he departed Japan convinced that someday the gospel would flourish again there. Final mission: desire for China. After years of travel and exhaustion, Francis Xavier still dreamed of one final mission: evangelizing China. He believed that converting China, the greatest empire in the East, would change the future of Christianity across all of Asia. But China was closed to foreigners. Francis tried to enter secretly, working with sailors and merchants who feared punishment. While waiting for passage on the small island of Shangchuan, he fell ill with fever. For weeks he suffered alone, attended only by a single companion. Some traditional accounts say Francis Xavier arranged secret passage with a merchant who never returned, though modern historians note that the evidence behind this story is unclear and may come from later retellings. Part 4. Miracles, Influence, Titles, and Canonization. Miracles performed during his missionary journeys. Throughout his missions in India, Southeast Asia, and Japan, Saint Francis Xavier became known for miracles that strengthened the faith of new believers. Missionaries recorded that he healed the sick, drove away demons, and comforted the dying with the sacraments. One of the most well-known miracles occurred in India when he blessed water and used it to heal a sick child who was near death. The child recovered instantly, leading many villagers to seek baptism. Witnesses also reported that Francis Xavier could calm storms at sea. When a violent storm threatened the missionaries during a voyage, he dipped his crucifix into the ocean and prayed. The waters became still, and the sailors considered it a divine intervention. Many healings occurred simply through his presence or the sign of the cross he traced over the sick. For the newly baptized, these miracles were signs confirming that the gospel was real and alive. His influence on the Jesuits and the global church. For the Society of Jesus, Saint Francis Xavier became the model of what a missionary should be: courageous, prayerful, tireless, and fully obedient to God's call. Jesuits across the world continue to study his methods, traveling lightly, learning languages quickly, protecting the poor, and preaching with compassion rather than force. His letters to Saint Ignatius reveal deep humility. Xavier often cried that he could not baptize people quickly enough because so many begged to enter the church. This passion for souls became the spiritual fire of the Jesuit missions for centuries. Jesuits today still refer to him as the heart of the mission, the one who carried the gospel farther than any missionary before him. Why people called him the St. Paul of the 16th century? Even during his lifetime, many Christians compared Francis Xavier to St. Paul the Apostle. Both traveled tirelessly, crossing nations and cultures to preach Christ where the gospel had never been heard. Like St. Paul, Xavier endured shipwrecks, sickness, violent opposition, and loneliness, yet he continued with unshakable joy. And just as Paul formed early Christian communities across the Roman Empire, Francis Xavier founded new Christian communities across Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Malacca, the Moluccas, and Japan. Because of his tireless journeys and missionary fruits, the Church honored him with the title Apostle of the East, and many called him the St. Paul of the 16th century. His death, canonization, and worldwide legacy. Saint Francis Xavier died on December 3, 1552, on the island of Shangchuan near China, longing to enter the mainland to preach the gospel. He died alone, whispering prayers for the missions he could not finish. His body, remarkably incorrupt, was carried first to Malacca and later to Goa, India, where it remains today at the Basilica of Bom Jesus. Pope Gregory XV canonized him in 1622, together with St. Ignatius of Loyola. Their canonization symbolized the powerful birth of the Jesuit order and its global mission. Today, he is patron of missions, missionaries, and Asia. His feast day on December 3rd is celebrated with great joy, especially in India, Japan, and Jesuit communities around the world. Part 5. Famous quotes of Saint Francis Xavier. I am not worthy of Christ unless I strive to win souls for him. This quote reflects Francis Xavier's entire identity. A man who believed love for Christ must overflow into evangelization. Give me the children and I will make them Christians. This quote shows his strategy. Teach the young and the whole community changes. Many people here are not becoming Christians for one reason only. There is nobody to make them Christians. He wrote this to Saint Ignatius, begging for more missionaries because the people themselves were hungry for God. Oh my God, teach me to be generous, to give and not to count the cost. These lines come from his famous prayer for generosity, still prayed daily by Jesuits worldwide. I wish to go from village to village to teach the poor, who are like sheep without a shepherd. Saint Francis Xavier focused his efforts on the abandoned, fishermen, slaves, widows, and orphans. If you are in danger, repeat the name of Jesus, for the devils tremble at his name. This reflects his simple faith. Jesus is the strength of every missionary. I I can no longer bear the thought of so many souls falling into hell. He wrote this near the end of his life, expressing the heartbreak that drove him to attempt entering China even when gravely ill. Lord, I love you, not because you can give me heaven, nor because you can condemn me to hell, but because you are my God. A powerful testimony that his love for God was pure and unselfish. Let us now pray with Saint Francis Xavier. O Saint Francis Xavier, Apostle of the East, we come before you with hearts full of gratitude, inspired by your courage, zeal, and love for souls. Guide us in our own missions, wherever God calls us, that we may live with the same devotion and humility that you showed in your life. Saint Francis Xavier, help us to share the gospel with joy, courage, and patience. May we reach out to the poor, the forgotten, and the lost, bringing the light of Christ to every corner of our world. Teach us to follow your example of tireless service and unwavering faith. O Holy Apostle, protect all missionaries, students, and followers of Christ around the world. Strengthen their faith in trials, guard them from danger, and grant them wisdom to teach and love as you did. Saint Francis Xavier, inspire us to surrender fully to God's will. Help us to love him above all things, to pray without ceasing, and to seek the salvation of souls in our own lives. May your missionary spirit ignite our hearts with zeal for Christ. O Saint Francis Xavier, Apostle of the East, pray for us and for all missionaries around the world. May your example inspire generations to follow Christ boldly, humbly, and lovingly. Amen.